Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
So that was President Trump speaking to reporters back in 2017. He was right, by the way. George Washington statues have been taken down. Then he was talking about Charlottesville and the hypocrisy of taking down statues of famous leaders throughout history. And what he said is still relevant today in 2020, 3 years later, as San Francisco's Abraham Lincoln High School is considering being renamed by a school committee that claims the former president did not demonstrate that Black Lives Matter. Joining me now to talk about that, Brandon Straka, the founder of the Walk Away campaign, and Jennifer Nassour, former chairwoman of the Massachusetts Republican Party and a Republican strategist. Good morning to both of you. President Trump just tweeted in reaction to hearing this news saying, quote, "So rude and unfair. When will people make a stand?" There's the president's tweet right there. Jennifer, I was under the impression that Abraham Lincoln did quite a bit to make sure that slavery was abolished, and then he was shot and killed.
He did, and this is absolutely ridiculous. He was the person who led the Union's defeat in the Civil War. He was the main purpose behind the Emancipation Proclamation, and the signer and the person who implemented it. He freed our slaves through that. And so as a result, all of a sudden, now this man is being demonized for something that he did because he had one little failure.
Yeah, I wanted to share some of this sound with you. Lincoln has been mentioned by both President Obama, conveniently, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris when it's to their advantage. Here's Harris making a reference to Lincoln during the vice presidential debate. Take a listen.
In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States.
Yeah, that's also very bad history if you look into the reasoning behind Lincoln delaying that vote. That was used, but it's incorrect. Is this just extreme wokeism? Do the wokesters on the school committee, are they just trying to get too cute here by taking things too far, Brandon?
Yeah, that's usually generally the case. But, you know, there's also, I think, just a massive inconsistency about it, too, because the fact of the matter is that I think, would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that this is really, I think, a targeted attack on historical figures who are white people as well. This rarely seems to happen to other historical figures who aren't white and typically aren't white men. Because the fact of the matter is, I mean, the objection that they seem to have to Abraham Lincoln is that apparently there was, you know, something historically between him and Native Americans that they're objecting to. But what they're not mentioning is that there are also Native American tribes who are slave owners. There are Black Americans who are slave owners. So if you look back historically, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult to find anybody from that era who meets their modern woke criteria of what a good and moral and decent human being is. They're not judging people through the lens of what was acceptable at the time. They're judging people through the lens of what they accept, what they find to be acceptable today, which is a standard that nobody historically can possibly meet up to. We have to look at what the positive and good attributes were of people at that time. Lincoln, as my co-panelist just mentioned, I mean, this is the man who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This is the man who freed slaves. This is, you know, we are the only country in the world that fought a war. to end slavery.
Yeah, and I think the assumption, I think the 13th Amendment, by the way, was abolished slavery, if I'm correct. But the assumption that this was going to be back in the 1860s, when politics and everything about our culture and our country looked a lot different, that was just going to be a clean, easy process. Lincoln ultimately lost his life in this fight. John Wilkes Booth was a Confederate, a sympathizer, and was pro-slavery, and he's the one who shot Lincoln in Ford's Theater in Washington. What message, Jennifer, do you think this committee and school boards around the country are saying to young people when if they don't like something, you can just woke it and get rid of it and rename it?
Yeah, I think it's a very slippery slope, and I think the president had mentioned it back in that clip in 2017. And so if we're not looking at time, at evolution, and at history as being symbolic for all of us and teaching lessons and teaching moments, then what do we have? Then we're developing a generation of folks out there who are going to just assume everyone should be perfect all the time, and that there is absolutely no room for learning and for any sort of developing. And that's terrible. That's not what the human race is about.
Yeah, Brandon, I'll pivot a little bit off the Abraham Lincoln High School to what's happening right now. The Cleveland Indians announced they're going to change their name. I think we expected this. There are other teams that have the Kansas City Chiefs, the Warriors, and the Braves, the baseball team out of Atlanta, and the Chicago Blackhawks. There was an article in one of the Chicago newspapers talking about the Blackhawks. Again, it's just really bad history. The Blackhawks were named after a U.S. Army unit that the founder served in, even though the logo does depict a Native American. Again, is this just going to continue, or at some point are we going to hit a fulcrum point and finally put an end to this kind of nonsense?
Well, I think eventually we'll be forced to get there because, as you know, the old saying goes, and then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. I mean, eventually everybody is going to get canceled and there's going to be nobody left to cancel. I mean, this is, right. I say cancel culture is a cancer culture, and that's what this is. It's a cancer that will eat and devour everything in its path. And so certainly if anybody out there thinks, well, I'm a moral and upstanding and righteous human being, and, you know, I'm not racist and I'm not sexist and I'm not a misogynist, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, we have seen people, Roseanne Barr lost her entire legacy and her entire show. By the way, I was a huge fan of the Roseanne show. I remember many episodes in which she addressed racism. She fought racism. Right. She was against these things. One tweet, she's out. So yes, they'll come for everybody until there's nobody left to come for anymore.
And I tell you what, you better not be on the right, because they're on a cancel parade for people on the right now. But no, you make a good point. Think about shows like All in the Family, for example, that would never get made today. Right. A show from the 1970s. Jennifer, I'll give you the final word on this. What message would you say to this school committee in particular?
Well, you know, what I would say is that they really need to sit back and think about what they want to teach the children. This is a school. We teach history in school, and there are lessons to be learned from it. And I think by starting to have this cancel culture that is affecting our schools at this point, maybe we should go back. Maybe we should take out the Museum of Natural History, because now cavemen were causing environmental issues and abusing animals. Yeah. I think that this is ridiculous. They need to go back. They need to think about what they're doing.
And misogynists, right? Yeah, we'll do that as well. Brandon Straka, Jennifer Nassour, thank you so much for your time. Great stuff there. We hope you come back.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.